Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is the patch 11.22 notes rundown. I am a bit under the weather today. Right now I currently have about a 39 Celsius fever, so for all of the Americans in chat that are watching, or wherever you're watching, it's about 102 Fahrenheit, so totally fine. Let's get into it, because you know what? While my temperature might be really hot, this patch is not very hot. End of season, so you're going to get your ranked, honor, clash, etc. rewards 11:59 p.m. locally on the last day of patch 11.22. And now we just move into the changes. So as usual, Riot, for any of these patches, they're always filler patches. They serve literally no purpose. Nothing can really be taken from them, because as we already know historically, preseason, anytime that preseason actual patch comes, it always shakes up the meta and it shakes up everything. So these things just have to sort of be gone back to once that patch actually comes. But for the actual sake of the patch itself, it doesn't really account for anything. Passive Assassins mark 20 to 170 to 35 to 182. So this is actually fine for Akali on her passive. This is going to reward more skilled Akali players, but obviously in matchups where she's struggling or having issues, it is going to mean that it's not really going to be that large of a difference. This does probably help top lane Akali, I would say, probably a little bit more than mid lane Akali, but I wouldn't immediately expect to see this translate into anything. Graves, passive damage reduced. So, okay, Graves' unique attacks have a generous crit ratio in the past, because building crit used to be risky for Graves in the old item system. Season 2021's item change has turned that around, and a building crit is super safe for him now, so we're tapping down the numbers on his pellet crit ratios. So 30% bonus AD to 20% bonus AD. I don't know what to think about this. So the thing is that Graves doesn't get crit until he completes his first item. And Graves' issue in laning phase doesn't have anything to do with his crit in laning phase. That's not what makes him strong at all inside of laning. When he gets this crit, it's sort of novelty. I mean, the change in the base damage per critical strike pellet, it's not going to change the fact that squishies are still going to get 2-tapped by him in mid to late game. All of this means is that he's going to be a little bit worse at killing tanks, but it doesn't matter because the tanks can't kill him. So this is actually just a non-factor nerf. Kalista, E damage ratio increased. Damage ratio 60% AD to 70% AD. Subsequent spear ratio 20 to 35% AD to 23.2 to 40.6 AD. I mean, it's fine for the Ren to have a little bit more damage, but ultimately at the end of the day, Kalista has a lot of other issues, and modifying the Ren damage is not magically going to make her come back. She has issues with current itemization. She's basically a utility AD carry, and this change doesn't really do anything. Kayn. Darken Q damage ratio decreased. Darken our target max health damage ratio increased. Q Reaping Slash 65% AD plus 5% plus 4% per 100% 100% AD of target's max health to 65% AD and plus 5% plus 5.5% per 100 AD of target's max health. So this is obviously if you're going Rost. Umbral Trespass is also buffed for Rost. He ends up getting a little bit of a larger heal now. It's not super, I mean, 5% of the target's maximum health. I mean, it is something, depending on exactly what target you are hitting, this you know, the threshold is going to vary. The problem is that Rost is not as viable right now as Shadow Kayn, because Rost is a very heavy jungler, or he's just a heavy top laner. And what I mean by heavy is that he is a champion that requires a lot of gold. He requires a lot of time to get going. Kayn by nature is a quest champion, so naturally in competitive as opposed to solo queue, it is a little bit different. But there's just other champions that you can pick that are really filling basically what Kayn is trying to achieve. Now, if the meta totally shifts into being very full of tanks and bruisers, then Ross naturally becomes good, but it's not because of the type of changes that Riot's giving him right here. Kha'Zix. Okay, so Q damage ratio reduced. So this makes literally no sense. I jokingly said that someone at Riot probably lost their promos to a Kha'Zix. I don't know when the last time Kha'Zix was ever seriously considered viable in competitive. Now, when I say that, I don't mean like it's been picked. I mean like actually considered viable in competitive. If you look at most high MMR players that commented on the preview of the patch, almost everyone was scratching their head on Kha'Zix. It made literally no sense. And this just, I mean, it just feels really bad. Q Taste Their Fear, total damage 60 to 160 plus 130% bonus AD to 60 to 160 plus 115% bonus AD. And then isolated damage is also going to be down quite a bit on the bonus AD part. So it's not super terrible early and mid game. That's not where the pain is really going to be felt. Well, mid into late, it's definitely starting to be felt, but definitely early, nothing really is going to be changing early for Kha'Zix. Maokai. Passive heal reduced early. W base damage reduced. Passive sapling magic 7 to 15% to 5 to 15%. What? W twisted advance 70 to 170 to 60 to 160. Okay, so this isn't what makes Maokai a support. This is actually, these are things that make Maokai a top laner. So this is really weird. Maokai's tanky support builds have been excelling in solo queue and even surpassing his already powerful AP support build paths. We're lowering his early game pressure and durability and returning it to later for solo lane Maokai. This doesn't make any sense. That literally makes no sense. So they're saying that they're returning it later on, but obviously Twisted Advance doesn't get anything back, and it doesn't matter because you're never getting to level 18 typically in a game anyway. So it doesn't matter that you end up making it back there. This is just an example of how out of touch Riot is with certain changes that they're making. This isn't going to mean that top lane Maokai suddenly gains more popularity. You just outright nerfed the champion, and you didn't give any incentive to play it top, and no one's going to play it top. If you actually want to nerf support lane Maokai, then the things that you end up doing to it are the sapling toss. You do stuff to saplings to make Maokai worse, or you actually, you cripple sapling toss or something, and you buff, his passive, or you nerf his sapling and you nerf his twisting advance, and then you buff his passive massively. That way he can just be an engage, but he doesn't actually have anything following up on it. So it would be like a weird version of Leona, but that's pretty much it. All right, Qiyana. Base health reduced, base health growth increased, Q damage change, E damage change. Qiyana is too strong in elite play, but weak in average play, so we're moving some power around instead of straight up nerfing her. I'm always excited when Riot says this. Base health, 500 to 520. Base health growth is up by 20. Q edge of Ixtal, 60 to 160 plus 90% bonus AD to 50 to 170 plus 75% bonus AD. What? E Audacity, 50 to 170 plus 70%. 50 to... What? Wait, they just buffed Goredrinker Qiyana. What? They made her tankier, and her damage isn't really going to be that different because Goredrinker Qiyana doesn't aim to stack a lot of AD. She gets a lot of CDR, evasiveness, and then Goredrinker. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense what they're doing here. This is very, very, very confusing. Okay, we move down here. Renekton, best champion in the game. W stun and lockout duration increased. W ruthless predator. Empowered stun duration 1 to 1.5 seconds. Lockout duration 0.375 to 0.525 seconds. Amazing. Changes to Renekton stun in 11.18 helped lower his popularity in pro play, but it came way too big of a cost. We're reverting those nerfs, and we'll be looking for other ways to make sure the Croc doesn't take a bite out of the pro scene again. Amazing, amazing. So even though they acknowledge that they're looking for other waves, they don't even attempt to begin, putting any in. They're just going to let him go back, so... Basically, what they're saying is they didn't want him at Worlds. But he was still picked at Worlds anyway. Riven. So, okay, Riven. W base damage increased. E shield ratio increased. W key burst 55 to 175 plus 100% bonus AD. Up by a flat 10. And bonus AD ratio is still fine. E Valor Shield is 85 to 205 plus 100% bonus to 85 to 205 plus 120% bonus AD. So for some reason, Riven's just getting massive buffs, and I know that there's already a couple of pro players that already do think that she is viable up in the top lane. Most notably, I think the person that commented on this change while I was doing the live viewings of Worlds was none other than the Fridge Factor. Saying that he does think that Riven is already competitively viable, and obviously Riven one-tricks in solo queue are going to be very excited about this, but Riven is still going to remain a champion that you should probably stay away from in lower MMR. Okay, now we move on to Varus. E damage ratio increased. Hail of Arrows. 60 to 220 to 60% bonus AD to 60 to 220 plus 80% bonus AD. So the question ends up becoming that does this actually mean that Varus is able to shove the wave? That ends up, that's what this change ends up meaning, which I don't know if this is going to impact his ability to shove the wave, because that was one of the main problems for Varus when he was doing the attack speed build, and why a lot of people stopped playing it. If that's not actually the case, then don't expect this to translate into anything meaningful. Yuumi, E-heal and move speed ratio decreased. So this is definitely one of the contributing factors to what makes Yuumi so oppressive, is her ability to just sway things in the later stages with her overpower heals, and the fact that she is a non-combat healer, which means that she can actively play around Grievous Wounds, even when being poked or, inside of combat. She just waits for the debuff to actually wear off. Izumi's move speed 15% plus 10% per 100 ability power to 15% plus 6% per 100 ability power, and then the heal 70 to 210 plus 40% ability power to 70 to 190 plus 35% ability power. Okay, so the flat healing reduction is going to hurt Liandry's a little bit more than it would hurt, you know, the Moonstone Renewer or something like that. But obviously the 5% ability power cut down, this is not as impactful on the Moonstone Renewer builds as the actual AP Yuumi builds that end up going like Liandry's and then continuing down that route. So the way that you should perceive this is that this is a pretty fair nerf to Yuumi, but she's still going to remain obviously a really strong champion. Okay, Goredrinker. Health 400 to 450, and Omnivamp 8% to 10%. Ceaseless Hunger, Ornn item. Okay, so Qiyana was buffed above, and she was the first champion that I thought of for the Goredrinker builds, and now she's getting even more HP, and the Omnivamp is going up by 2%. So one of the other things to mention about this is Rost is a Goredrinker user, so Rost is actually getting a little bit more HP, and he's getting 2% more Omnivamp as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on here with Goredrinker. Obviously, all Goredrinker champions that are trying to be bruisers in the actual sense of being bruisers and legitimately being tanks are going to like these changes because their main concern wasn't actually the damage. The thing, though, about this is that now I think that Goredrinker is probably just more of a tanky item than the actual tank mythics, which is kind of funny for a lot of champions, but obviously for some of the tanks, you still don't have the option to just outright take Goredrinker, so that is pretty much it on that front. And that is a very, very short patch. This is a super short patch. Upcoming skins and chromas, Victorious Blitzcrank, and Arcane Jace and Arcane Vi. Make sure to be watching Arcane. I think that a lot of Twitch streamers are going to co-stream the first episode. I'll be doing that, obviously, on my Twitch channel, and the following chromas will be released in later on in this patch. And for overall thoughts on the patch, though, this doesn't touch anything. This doesn't really move any solo queue champions. It doesn't really do anything for competitive. You know, for like, I'm immediately, one of my thoughts is like, how is this going to alter my patron solo queue or clash tier lists? And realistically, this doesn't touch anything. The only thing that I could maybe see being changed would be Qiyana. I think that Qiyana is probably the biggest change from the patch. A lot of people might think Renekton, but you guys already know how I feel about Renekton, best champ in the game. But outside of that, just an uber short patch and really just a lot of fillers. So guys, patch 11.23 here on T1 Fighting, and that will I think that does it for season 11 once that ends up coming back. So we'll see you guys all in 2 weeks, and hopefully we get a real patch because it's been about 5 in a row of not so great ones.